So today, let's delve into something many of us probably haven't thought much about: parasitic worms. Specifically, a fascinating little guy called Heptamegacanthus niekerki. It's a thorny-headed parasite with a surprisingly complex story attached to it. Here's the kicker. This parasite is exclusively found in an endangered animal, the giant golden mole of South Africa. Intriguing, right?
Absolutely. What makes Heptamegacanthus niekerki so fascinating is not just the fact that it's tied to the giant golden mole, but also its own unique biology and highly specific features. It's like a tiny biological marvel. The genus was only described in 1990 by a researcher named Mary Spencer Jones, and it's the only species in its genus. That's already so rare in the parasitic world.
Right, and it's not just rare, it's very particular. I read that it latches onto the host's rectal wall using rows of hooks on an organ called its proboscis. Those details are bizarrely intricate, especially for a creature that's only about 4 millimeters long. I mean, 7 huge hooks, smaller hooks decreasing in size, arranged in rings, and a feeding organ? That's like alien tech-level design.
It is, and it gets even more complex. Those hooks aren't even radially symmetrical. And let's talk about its life cycle. While its specific life cycle hasn't been totally figured out yet, we do know it's likely similar to other acanthocephalans. It involves at least 2 hosts. First, an arthropod, possibly an insect, and then the definitive host, which in this case is the giant golden mole. The larvae mature into a form called a cystacanth in the arthropod host, and don't fully develop until they're ingested by the mole.
So, let me get this straight. These little parasites live part of their lives inside a bug, then basically wait around in that stage until the mole eats the bug. That's a wild survival strategy.
Exactly. The cystacanth stage is essentially a dormant waiting game. It's like biological patience. Once inside the mole, the parasite latches on to the mole's intestine, or in this case, more specifically its rectum, and grows into a sexually mature adult. Then it releases its eggs back into the mole's feces. It's a complete, if somewhat unappetizing, circle of life.
Okay, but all these details aside, why should we care about this tiny worm? I mean, beyond the fun trivia, what's the bigger picture here?
Well, the interaction between Heptamegacanthus and the giant golden mole actually paints a broader picture of biodiversity and environmental impact. The worm's distribution is entirely tied to its host, which is endangered. The exact forests in South Africa where this mole lives, and therefore where the parasite exists, are under threat from urbanization and exploitation. It's a reminder of how interconnected ecosystems are and how one species' survival can affect others, even down to microscopic parasites.
That's a great point. So these tiny parasites are actually dependent on conservation efforts for the giant golden mole, which means if we lose the moles, we lose Heptamegacanthus niekerki too. Symbiosis at its most eye-opening, huh?
It's absolutely a symbiotic relationship, though not the mutually beneficial kind. But yes, it highlights how delicate these chains of survival are. Also, it underlines the importance of studying even the most underappreciated life forms. Parasites like this one are often dismissed as gross or irrelevant, but they're part of the bigger ecological puzzle and can reveal so much about evolution, host-parasite dynamics, and even ecosystem health.
I like that. A reminder that everything, no matter how small or obscure, has a role in the grand design of our planet. But let's circle back to the biology. What about its anatomy caught your attention the most? I mean, beyond the hooks, of course.
Oh, the hooks are cool, but I was fascinated by its reproductive system. For example, males inject semen into the female using a structure called a copulatory bursa, and then they seal her up temporarily with something produced by their cement glands. Cement glands. It's like biological engineering, but for reproduction.
That sounds like they've thought of everything, evolutionarily speaking. But speaking of its anatomy, I'm surprised it's so small even for a worm. Normally, in parasitic worms, the females are much larger than the males. But not here, right?
Right. The difference in size between male and female Heptamegacanthus niekerki is surprisingly minimal. It's small even compared to other members of its family. We know the mole is its definitive host, and not some accidental host, because the parasites collected were fully mature, with females producing eggs. But the small size is still something researchers are trying to fully understand.
All of this is incredible. It's funny how one tiny worm can tell such a layered story, from its role in its ecosystem to how evolution has shaped its survival mechanisms. Any final takeaways you'd like our listeners to remember?
Yes, I'd say let's not underestimate the small players in our ecosystems. Parasites like Heptamegacanthus niekerki may seem irrelevant or even unappealing at first glance, but they're integral to understanding how life operates as a whole. Preserving the giant golden mole and its habitat has a ripple effect. It protects an entire community of organisms, even down to a 4-millimeter parasite with hooks. It's a reminder that conservation efforts, big or small, always matter.
Well said. This has been an eye-opening dive into the life of an organism many of us would have never known existed. Thanks for shedding light on this fascinating world. And to our listeners, maybe next time you're learning about endangered species, think about the hidden ecosystems within them too. Until next time.